when I was still a little kid was Some Enchanted Evening. You might remember it as the Babysitter Bandit episode, which is a fair name for her because, man, she was just horrible. In fact, because this was the very first Simpsons episode I ever witnessed, and at such a young and impressionable age at that, I figured The Simpsons was a suspenseful, crime oriented, or even horror themed program. You know what the funny thing is? I was right. What you may or may not know is that Some Enchanted Evening was the first Simpsons episode in production. For that, it was delayed because, as executive producer James L. Brooks put it, the animation was shit. Classic Chupo, the animation studio that you probably know for making Rugrats and a variety of other Nicktoons, and my personal favorite, the perverted duck detective cartoon Duckman, head of the animation. Kind of. Sort of. There was work done on the episode overseas in a South Korean studio that Matt Groening couldn't wait to unchain The Simpsons from, hoping for a more lifelike and believable style of animation to one day match his sharp and cynical family themed wit. The Simpsons was all about pairing real life misery and cheekiness with a feel good family value. But there was nothing feel good or family friendly about what that studio in South Korea did to the early post Tracy Ullman show Simpsons. It was like a botched surgery. Marge looked like a frog. The scene in which she exchanges an unrequited kiss from Homer makes her lips look like an exaggeration of a prolapsed anus. And the fight that broke out between Brooks and Gabor Chupo, well, it got violent. Fists were thrown. Gabor would later claim he fell down a set of studio stairs and rubbed ash on his forehead as a show of solidarity with the Catholic employees at 20th Century Fox. That wasn't what happened at all. You can easily find the alleged original episode, one of which 70% of everything had to be redone, on YouTube. But that's the keyword alleged. It wasn't the original of the original, and you're never going to find it and never going to see it. But I did. And I wish I'd witnessed a real life train wreck or a house fire instead. It isn't that the animation of the original was much different, but the scripting and voice delivery definitely was. The original zoom in on the Simpsons residence is exaggerated, warped, and contorted. There's a bit of a dark, ambient, low humming sound in the background. Although it's faint, it's clearly perceptible. Marge's humming by the stove is the same, as is her dialogue to Maggie about enjoying taking care of the family. But the part that practically shocked me into jumping out of my skin was that the toaster was gone. Instead, a salt and pepper shaker clearly labeled arsenic in bold Arial letters is seen, as Marge shakes it in slowly and deliberately, continuing to hum while her lips neither match the lines to Maggie nor her humming. There's a little black squiggly line on the bottom of her blue beehive hair, which when she turns around, it almost looks like a cartoon bleach. I'm not sure what the South Korean studio was attempting to communicate with that, but it was there. And although non detailed, it was clearly visible. One of Marge's eyes looks mildly cross eyed, but I think that was just an animation error. No wonder Brooks was so perturbed. But that wasn't even the worst part. The part in which she hunches over to kiss Maggie in her chair is especially disturbing. In the so called original episode on YouTube, she bends over with her mouth resembling that of a cartoon frog with a blue cucumber jammed and twisted on top of her skull. But here, her skin actually turns mildly green. The line in which she mourns Maggie, realizing she's a separate human being from Marge, also produces what is presumably an animation error. Maggie disappears for a few frames. Marge perks up as she does in the alleged original that you might have seen, further implying that that's indeed what happened. However, there's a crudely drawn symbol in the seat Maggie is no longer occupying. It It took some squinting, but sure appeared to be a dome with horizontal stripes, almost like a Freemason temple. I can neither confirm nor deny what that was actually supposed to mean. After Homer storms into the kitchen and attempts to turn on the radio, some roaring 20s pop jazz about making breakfast for your lover begins to play. I'm not entirely sure why, but perhaps it was the South Korean studio disobeying the showrunner's orders and attempting to add a cheerier tone to the overall episode. This is when it gets really bad. When when Bart rips open the refrigerator door, there's a severed human head inside of it. Was this a precursor to the severed cryogenic heads and vats in Matt Groening's future series Futurama? There wasn't any name on a plaque. I can make out partially gray hair, blue eyes, and a slight up upturned smile with his lips pursed forward. With that said, Bart closes the refrigerator door fast with no additional emotion. It was too deliberate to be an animation mistake. I simply didn't get it. Instead of a massive mound of sugar on top of his morning bowl of frosty crusty flakes, Bart pours the shaker worth of arsenic on top of his cereal. Marge doesn't attempt to persuade him to stop or to not bother eating it. When Bart races off to school, his textbook's cover clearly depicts a naked and vulgarly drawn, highly graphically detailed Greek god Poseidon with a golden plated trident held up firmly in his hand. Homer is seen leaving in the background, not out the hallway like in the supposed original, but down in the Simpsons kitchen hallway floor, as if there was a hidden elevator or escalator. When Marge reaches for the kids' lunch boxes, they both sport a yellow eagle holding a sprig of laurel in one talon and a bundle of three blue arrows in its other. The big band music begins to die down as Marge walks up to Maggie defeatedly, and yet another presumed animation error depicts Maggie talking to Marge instead of Marge talking to Maggie, simply saying the words, "Alive! Alive!" The part about calling the therapist Dr. Marvin Monroe is replaced with an announcement of the day the music died, in which famous musicians Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and their pilot all unpredictably passed away in a horrible plane crash. The radio begins to static, and a roaring, distorted garage band rendition of Louie begins. Oh, the cover that the FBI searched the original notice for several decades ago, to say the least. This was odd. The scene with Marge hyperventilating while radios rotate around her head is mostly intact, but the radio place was swirling cerulean Ativan pins. Upon pausing the frames, I could make out the characters NY $9. The hyperventilating ends with several disjointed frames of Marge dropping to the floor as if she had a stress-induced stroke, while a snake crawls on top of her, steals her purse. To this day, I'm unsure why she had it on her person, and slithers off into a mouse hole in the living room wall. The snake was also poorly animated. It more like a bedsheet tied around a large salami, or perhaps a tall person's throat and neck. When Homer calls the babysitting service, he says he's releasing the client list and that they can never hope to stop him because he'd refuse to ever get on anybody's plane. Full stop. Marge's prolapsed anus lips are every bit as exaggerated in the episode you may have watched. The invitation to watch the happy little elves is intact, and the rest of the animation is the same as what you may have already seen. Given that the supposed original features a crime television show announcing the children's babysitter as being the babysitter bandit, this was bothersome enough as it was. But in tandem with everything else, it was just that much more perturbing. The only the only differences I noticed were that Bart's and Lisa's screams appeared to be silent, but my dachshund's whimpering revealed them to now be so loud that only dogs could hear it. And before Lisa grabs on the door and yanks on the handle in hopes of escape, the house scene that precedes it demonstrates the house evaporating like a liquefied licorice jello mold. If that's the case, why are Bart and Lisa still clearly inside the house attempting escape of an untimely fatal fate? I can only imagine what would have happened next if more work on the episode had been done before the fight between Brooks and Gabor broke out. At the end of the day, I have no answers. No one affiliated with The Simpsons who's still around is interested in talking to me. And no one cares that I stole the copy of the episode after storming in from the break room while James was striking Gabor. Did they ever ask for it back? No. They didn't ask for the folded piece of paper that was tucked into the circular canister either. Something about a client list? Everything after that is in symbols that I could never hope to analyze or otherwise understand. I'd send it to the police, but I have my doubts I'd ever get it back, even if it never led them to anything. I have a hunch they would refuse to let it lead them to anything.